Welcome to North Node, the yoga and astrology podcast. I'm Becky, a yoga teacher, astrologist, and businesswoman.
And I'm Laura, founder of Soul Sanctuary Studios, yoga teacher trainer, and wellness coach and consultant. In this podcast, we'll be diving into down-to-earth but deep soul conversations.
We'll explore how you can connect and stay on purpose with your true north alignment through the transformative lenses of yoga and astrology.
Each episode is designed to inspire and guide you on your own journey towards self-discovery, self-love, and personal growth. We'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Your support will help us reach more listeners who are looking for insightful discussions and meaningful connection.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Okay, Ellie, so this is such a pleasure for me because I was really jealous when you did the interview with Becky. I was like, I want to speak to Ellie first. How childish, but I'm so glad I've got my window to do that now. So Ellie Burt is with us, or Posh to Ellie, as most people will have known and heard of her. And just to give a little bit of a brief kind of intro as to how we met and came together, which I know you explained a bit about with Becky. So this was right at the beginning of my yoga journey. So I had actually just moved to Worcester, had no friends. And it was about starting up the cafe and the yoga studio. And you were one of the first people really that came through those doors. And I think with your sister, Tony, right? I remember her coming too.
I think I made her come to one of the, no, it was Nuffield Health.
Oh my God.
That was where me and Tony used to go. It was before your yoga. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. I'd forgotten that. So I was teaching at Nuffield, before I started the studio, and then started Wayland's Yard. And I remember because you were still commuting to London and it was right next to the station. So
Birmingham.
Run in and out. Sorry, commuting to London, to Birmingham. Yes.
Yeah.
But so you would run in and out of the class trying to get your train to get to work, right?
Yeah. Like every morning I was the perfect yoga student. And I always say, I started up that 30-day for £30 offer that you used to offer. And that first month, I literally went, I genuinely think 30 times. I don't think someone could have possibly abused an introductory offer as much as I did. But I used to wake up in the morning, get to your class that you or Tracy used to do the classes in the morning. You did a meditation class sometimes at 6 o'clock. And then the yoga would start at 6:30. I'd finish at 7:30. I'd put talcum powder in my armpits because I was sweaty. And then I just get on the train to go to work. And then the only evening session that you ran that I used to be able to make was the Tuesday one that was at 6:30. And I just remember this day where I was hysterical because I'd become so addicted to yoga in this time, and I'd signed on for your class and the trains were late. And you obviously have the policy, or most yoga studios do, of you can't come in late, you can't interrupt the class. And I was I am going to get there. And I had to bash down the door. And you were like, Ellie, it's okay. Come on in. You're absolutely fine. But you got me addicted to yoga. So yeah, I've got a lot to thank you for.
Oh my God. Your memory is amazing. And as you're saying that, it's just taking me right back to those days. I mean, obviously
it was elite. It was elite that time. The people at the studio, the community, we did some group outings and stuff. I have so many memories from that time. It was amazing.
It really was a magic time, and it still is, but I think it was so boutique. It was it was small. There was this real close-knit group of people, die hard, weren't they? And I mean, the studios still get incredible community. It's just bigger, and a lot of those people are still in there. But it's so amazing to have conversations with you, some of the originals. And you remember those benches in the cafe, and we would sit next to each other and chat before class, because I'd also have to wait, remember, for the chefs and whatever, for everything, the tills to close and then for us to go up. And we'd sit together and chat. And you weren't happy, right? You weren't happy in your job, I think it's fair to say.
No, I really do think that yoga was my salvation. And I know that sounds dramatic, but perfect for this podcast and for getting people into yoga for sure. But I was absolutely miserable in my corporate job. And I'd had different corporate jobs because I kept shuffling corporate jobs thinking that the job itself was the problem. Whereas it was just I wasn't doing something that was right for me. And I had this increasing sense of unease over like a 5-year period, and it really got to a head when I started yoga and found you. And you were massively part of that and helping me shift my mindset. And talking of those benches, I remember being sat with you at the front of Wayland's Yard, and you'd just got into like Tony Robbins and mindset and things like this. And I was starting to do the posture behind the scenes and working with people, but I was still doing my full-time job. And I remember you going, Ellie, you need to burn the boats. You need to burn the boats. You can't be doing both. You have to make that decision and you can't go back. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job. And I quit my job. I just did it because you told me to burn the boats. And I use that phrase all the time. Like you said that to me. It had such an impact on me. And it's just funny because here we are, like 7 years later, and I did burn the boats, and thank God I did.
God, that is incredible. And that's why, like, yeah, this gets me so excited. I've been so excited to do this podcast because what I would love people to get from this is burn the boats, not joking, is that it can all be okay. Is that, I guess what I felt when I met you as well was like, I've been there, and not that long ago, right? Because I was miserable in London working my job. I'd burnt the boats and I'd taken the leap to be a yoga teacher. And and we'll talk about this. It doesn't mean that it's easy. Life hasn't got easier. That's not true. No. It's just got happier. Like it's just got better. Like I'm just more content. And I had this like burning thing in me that was like, everyone needs to know it's okay, that they can do what they want. And when you came in and you were literally doing the thing that I was doing and were like, I don't know if I can, I just wanted to be like, you can, there was that. And that's why I think when we were talking about what should this topic of this podcast be about, there's still that burning thing in me because there's still, 90% of the people in the world who are doing that. That's a made up statistic. But, a lot of people who are going, I just have to do this thing. And things are different now, right? I think at that time it was easier for me to burn the boats because it was just me. Like I totally get now, like with 2 small children and maybe people have mortgages and stuff like that. And you can easily listen to like that naive 20-year-old going, just do it. Like it doesn't feel like it's that simple. But it's kind of relative in the size of the leap at the time that you do it.
It was appropriate for me. I didn't, and I don't have children, and it was appropriate. But yeah, you're right. Like there are some people where it's going to be a much scarier burning of the boats than perhaps we had. Because I always just thought, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just go back and get another job again. But it did work out, so it's all good.
And here we are. And so that's why the title of this podcast we are doing today is about living in alignment, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because the work that you do is very much about alignment, right? And posture alignment specifically. But what I've loved watching from the sidelines is like the evolution of you and the work that you're doing in the way that you seem to have moved and included now a lot more of the emotionality of alignment and even the spirituality, or you seem pretty open to that now. Which feels like an addition. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. So when I started what I do, and the name of it is postural alignment therapy or posture therapy, but the way that I'm trying to kind of, I guess, like wrap it up and brand it now is just calling it posture, like you're doing your posture work. That's semantics. But so it's postural alignment therapy. And when I started it, I was very much like, oh, this is incredibly easy. Like someone's got a knee that's not in the most like biomechanically optimal position. Someone's got a twisted pelvis. Someone's head's poking too far forward of their body, that type of thing. So it works off the premise that humans have a sort of blueprint that their bones and their joints and their muscles should follow. And if we lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, we would more or less fit that blueprint still. But because we're sat indoors on chairs all day, our body warps and adapts to the demand and the load that we're putting on it. And we become inefficient as movement machines. So when I started, and admittedly, probably up until about 2 years ago, so for the first 5 years, it was very solidly a movement practice. Do this exercise, wake up your hip, pelvis change position, shoulder pain goes, whatever it was. And I think that I was a mixture of like arrogant, naive, and young. Let's bundle those three things together, where I just didn't have the experience and the wherewithal to realize that actually it's not really about people's bodies at all. The bodies is like the surface level problem to tackle. The real issue is how people view themselves, what they are doing in order to look after themselves on a daily basis, how much they value themselves and how much worth they see in themselves to make time for their health and wellness. And that's so much of this muscular tension that's feeding this imbalanced posture and imbalanced joint positions are actually caused by a mixture of stuck emotions, stuck trauma, and just the way that you perceive yourself. So if you're like holding yourself small or pushing your chest out to prove a point because you're so alpha. And the more that I do it, the more I realize that actually I think it is solely emotional, but the emotions present themselves as muscular tension, but also, if you are sitting still all the time, that is a physical manifestation of you not living your life to the full. If you're sat on a chair the whole time, you are not living your life to the full, and your body is trying to say to you, come on, your back's hurting, do something about it, be your own boss. You can, that's where I am now. It's all emotional in my mind.
That is so interesting because that is a long way actually from where like when you first started. And I'm really curious then. So, because obviously I know you're not working with people one-to-one at the moment and you're doing your like posture squad, so your online platform. But if you know that like, a lot of the root cause of these issues that people are coming across is their emotional, their mindset, then like what value do you see in your postural like exercises? Because if they don't change their mind, how are those exercises? I mean, I know they're going to work, but ultimately, are you not like inspired to treat the mind more now?
Absolutely, yes. So I see the posture exercises as the vessel to the mind, and it's exactly the same as yoga, isn't
Ah,
it? It's posture is yoga. The methodology is different. The exercises are a bit different. It's not the same as yoga. I love yoga, but they're not the same. But it's the same premise. Like everything is connected. Yoga is this path to spiritual enlightenment that most people find through the gateway of their body. And that's how I see yoga, and that's how I see posture. So as like you're branding it to people as do this exercise that's going to help with your back pain. But by doing this exercise that helps them with their back pain, it's probably going to be something where they're having to lay still with themselves for 10 minutes whilst things like shift into place. And in that 10-minute period, you've got some people that just cannot stand the discomfort of laying quietly for 10 minutes. And they're sure that they need to be doing hamstring curls or calf raises, or they have to be doing stuff to occupy their mind to take them out of their body. There are so many people that want to do too much because that's just the way that we are. And what posture teaches you is you have to sit with it. It's probably going to be incredibly uncomfortable. You're probably going to feel like you're not doing very much. But by not doing very much in the posture exercises, it then opens this gateway to your mind and to your brain where you suddenly have that time to sit with yourself, where you can start reprogramming things. And as you do each posture exercise along the way, it's like you're unlocking the next level into how good you feel physically, but how much power you feel like you have within you, because pain, tension, all of this stuff, it makes you feel hopeless. It makes you feel like you can't do anything. Everything is so hyper medicalized and given names and conditions and diagnoses. And I hate all of that because all it does is make someone feel like it's completely out of their control and there's nothing that they can do about it. Whereas my mindset post yoga operates completely differently, where basically everything in the world can change, but you have to be the vehicle to change. And so that's why posture is so helpful, because it is these physical and practical tools to put the physical body in better alignment so it feels better, but it's the gateway to unlocking the patterns of the brain that have got that person stuck in that position in the first place. So yeah.
It's so clever, and it's like it's funny because I mean, and we sort of shout about it on the website, but people don't really understand what we're talking about. I don't think is when people say to me, "What's your USP?" Right? As a yoga teacher, as a yoga studio, and I would always say we bring psychology into yoga for that reason because I don't see much point in like what this is on the teacher training where we distinguish between being an instructor, a yoga instructor, and a yoga teacher. So there's plenty of instructors out there. Lift your right hand up, put your left foot back foot 45 degrees, blah, blah, blah. That's an instructor. You're instructing someone to put the body. But a teacher is teaching someone something about themselves.
Totally.
Something more like
Yeah.
wisdom, sharing, their journey, like the spirituality. So it's interesting because what you're kind of reiterating is that it's bi-directional, this relationship between the body and mind. So although we've got to the point we both believe that our physical manifestations in our body come directly from an emotional start point, what we're actually saying is that you don't necessarily have to go to the start point to fix it. You can actually meet the person where they are in their physicality. And sometimes that is the most accessible way for them to get back to that emotional start point, right?
Totally. And that's exactly the way that I use things with compensations and dysfunctions in the physical body as well. So again, it's like everything's connected, everything works the same, but you just have to like see it with the right lens. But so for example, someone's hip could seize up, and which is very common, and the deep hip flexor seizes up, the pelvis becomes wonky, the spine gets scoliotic, the shoulders are hanging out of position, and the head is hanging forwards of the body. The root of that is the hip that's seized up. But because you've got this web of other things that have now compensated around that initial dysfunction, you can't just go in at the hip because it's tangled up in this barbed wire of other things. So actually, you have to start at a different point. You have to de-thaw the iceberg, not from the very beginning, because the body can't handle it. It won't work if you go straight in at the center. You have to unwind from the more recent levels of the compensation that have crept in. So it might be breathing or it might be shoulder exercises that then balance the spine that enable you to get in at the hip. And you're completely right. It's like that for everything. You can't just, people aren't ready to have the true answer thrown at them. They can't, their brain won't understand it, their ego will fight it. It just won't work. You have to drip feed things in a way that the realizations come with time. So yeah, I fully agree with that.
And that's that phrase, like meet people where they are, is so
Yeah.
powerful because, yeah, otherwise you're right, they just resist. But isn't it frustrating? I get really, and that sounds really patronizing, like, oh, I know. It's not that, but I think when you've been doing it for a long time and you're so passionate and interested in the psychology and the physicality, when somebody walks in, you can read a certain amount about them. And there are so many truth bombs that I just want to be like, right, it's this, just do this. But it doesn't work. So you do just have to meet them where they are. There's another brilliant phrase, isn't it? Which is give them what they want, but serve them what they need. So it's like, it's like yoga class titles. We can't get men to yoga, but if you call it yoga for sport, they might toddle along. And then if they come along, then you can kind of drop some truth bombs because you've got them in the room. But it's that like, you're not going to get to anyone unless you speak their own language. So yeah, amazing. So we're all totally on the same page. And it's funny how like I started off my journey really with yoga, but with psychology, doing my psychology training. So I feel really, I'm like madly interested in that psychology. You kind of started at the other end where you went
Yeah.
like really interested in the physicality and now are talking more about psychology. So I mean, we could talk for hours, but what we sort of decided that we would do today, because there's a lot of like, we teach, don't we? Generally, we teach on kind of, yoga and philosophy, and you do a lot of your alignment, that actually it might be nice for us to share personally, like maybe some of the struggles we've gone through, things that we've learned. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Ellie, and
That's quite right, Laura.
these are more personal questions because I know you know a lot about the theory, but it would be really nice to hear like from you on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about when you came to Wayland's Yard to do yoga to start with, but was there a moment when you realised that what you wanted to do? Like, was there that aha moment? Or was it drip drip?
Yes, there was an aha moment. So, like I said, I'd had about 5 years of just like increasing I was living in London. I just remember this one day, I was in the streets of Notting Hill where I worked, and I called my mum and I was like, I just don't think I'm living my own life. I don't know how I got here. And I genuinely was just like, what's going on? Like, how am I 25 working in London? I hate this. And it's not to say that everyone will, but I just hated it. And I kept saying that I wanted to go back home and I wanted to ride horses and live in the countryside. And everyone around me was like, you're a party girl. What will you do if you leave home? You're made for London. Like, you'll never make money. You'll never be successful. I had all these voices. And this was obviously just before a time that I trusted myself and my instincts and my gut and my intuition. And I listened to those voices for so long. And then it got to the point where I basically had a bit of a mental breakdown in London, came back to Worcester, and that's when I met you and started yoga and was still working in a corporate job. But yoga really, I always say it hardened my body in a way that I had been like out of shape, wasn't into exercise, didn't like movement, and my muscles started toning. And I was like, oh, this is quite cool. And it softened my joints because I was very stiff and inflexible. I couldn't cross my legs, I couldn't touch the floor, I couldn't do any of that stuff. So I was like, in this very short period of time with yoga, I not only physically felt completely different, but I just mentally felt so different. Meeting people like you, but other teachers. And there was just a nice group of people that didn't just have, in inverted commas, like normal jobs. And it helped me see that that was a possibility because I don't think I'd really had that like shown to me before, that you didn't have to go to an office 9 till 5 and go on the train every day. And I was like, oh my God, there are people like me doing this kind of stuff. But because of Worcester being the size that it is, I was like, I don't want to do the yoga teacher training just because I felt like I'm not quite sure how I would make enough money doing it. And it's not to say people can't, because there's always a demand, but I just felt that. And I did the sports massage qualification next because I was like, similar, somatic, did that. And then I finished it and I was like, this doesn't sit right with me. It's not that it's not helpful, but it doesn't get in at why muscles are tense in the first place. It's treating a symptom, it's not treating the root cause. And then from there, what I did was I started like researching online all these different things that I could potentially do: acupuncture, physio, go back to uni, osteopath. I just looked at all of these things. And then during this time, I stumbled upon Pain Free by Peter Goskew, which is my joke about being my Bible. And that was my aha moment. I'd known for 2 years prior to that I wanted to work for myself and do something, but I didn't know what it was. And I read this book and I was like, this is it. There's nobody else and barely anybody else in the UK doing it. It makes complete and utter sense to me. And there's a gap in the market, so I can see that I can make a business from that. So I had a very clear aha moment, but it was after many years of like murkiness and confusion, I would say.
That is really clear. And what's funny is when I did those Tony Robbins, because I went to Amsterdam, went to Florida, and did those Tony Robbins workshops, and the Egoscue method was part of
Yes.
that. So I was like aware of that. So when you said you were doing it, I was like, like I had heard of it, but you're right. There was no one in the UK doing it. And it's been an absolute like raving success, and it's been actually amazing watching like you and your journey doing that, because yeah, what you set out and what you envisaged in that aha moment came to fruition, right?
Yeah. Well, and I also, to bring it back to Wayland's Yard and our early chats, I remember we were sat downstairs and I said, I want to create an online, you might not remember this, but I was like, I want to create an online subscription where it's like the go-to shop for posture, but more than that, like other health and wellness and diet and lifestyle stuff. And that is literally what my business is now. So I had that vision before I'd even left my job, or I was even working with people I was working with people one to one, but not like fully. And I had it back then, and it's not taken quite the form that I thought, but it's actually remarkably similar to kind of what I set out all that time ago, which I just think is really weird.
It is so weird. And it is that like if we can be open to the spirituality of just like utter trust that we know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just, I hope as well, people listening kind of go like, that's real, that's a real thing, even though it doesn't feel real and it doesn't feel possible. So when we talk about this, I'm aware that like it can sound a little bit like happily ever after, you know, all the time. But let's talk about some of the real stuff, some of the struggles that have happened along the way. So, what has been the hardest thing about that transition or about the work you do? Like, what's the hardest thing about it?
The hardest thing about it, and this to me sounds a little bit like, when you get asked an interview question and then you have to like answer to make yourself look good. You know, when people are like, oh, so,
Yes.
what's your biggest weakness? And you're like, I'm just too amazing. So it feels a bit like I'm about to say that. But the thing that has got in the way the most is genuinely how much I love what I do. That's the problem because of how it affects me mentally. So I genuinely am endlessly fascinated by the human body, by muscles, by posture. I love that, but I also am obsessed with trying to understand people, their motivations, their psychology. How do I get people doing this thing that they've never heard of before? It's a preventative thing. Well, it's a cure thing, but I want to get people in before they have pain. I want it to be preventative and part of a lifestyle, but no one's heard of it. So I have all these puzzles constantly swirling in my head that I want to figure out. And admittedly, it just drives me time and time again to burnout, which is probably the biggest issue that I have. I don't know if that's kind of along the right lines of what you want, but if I'm answering truthfully, that's probably the right answer.
That's all I want is
Yeah.
the truth and the authenticity. And I think that's what so many people would resonate with, and me too, right? Burnout. I think when you are really passionate about something, it's hard not to care. It's impossible not to
Yeah, yeah.
care. And so then when do you stop? And I totally resonate with that. So what's your remedy? What helps you with that?
What has been my remedy is massively refining what my business offers. That has been hugely helpful. So I think anytime you set up a business, you have to try a whole bunch of different stuff because you have to see what you enjoy, what people want, what gets people results. And so I have gone through many different iterations of things. Predominantly for a long time, it was working with people one to one. I've done my group sort of deep dive program things. I've got a group deep dive program, which I will still run, but I haven't run recently because I've been writing my book. I've got the membership now, but there's been a million different iterations of other things along the way. And I was trying to carry too many things all at once. So your brain is getting pulled in different directions. And that was too much. So it's been hugely helpful to just refine now where I just do my membership platform and I will also do once a year my deep dive course. And that helps give you clarity, but it also forces you to have burnout so many times about something that you care about because I've been burnt out before working for somebody doing a job that I don't like and being really miserable, unhappy. That's one type of burnout, and that's a very hopeless feeling burnout. But in some respects, it's an easier one. I've been there. It's easier to get yourself out of that one because you don't really have like a personal tie to the thing that you keep burning out from. But to have this thing that's like your obsession, your burning obsession, and to not almost be able to control yourself with it. It's like every time I start, it's this snowball that rolls downhill and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and I always fall into its trap. It's harder, and you just have to be incredibly disciplined with yourself. So I think, we'll probably come onto this a bit, but with especially at the beginning of lockdown, my business was taking off and I couldn't say no to anything. I wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't doing my own posture practice. I stopped doing yoga. I was just working all the time and felt awful for it. And now I have these things in place where it's like my health is my non-negotiable because what a hypocrite I am to run the business that I do if I am not prioritizing myself first. So that's also been really, really helpful. It's like this journey of building up my self-worth to put myself at the top of the tower because the business can't operate if I'm not looking after myself. And that's been a really helpful but very difficult journey to come from because despite being loud and confident, I think I've actually always had incredibly low self-worth and I'm only getting there in the last couple of years. And it's been weirdly confrontational to be like, oh, I am deserving of like doing the things that I enjoy and not just trying to like keep everyone else happy all the time. So yeah.
God, there's so much in there, Ellie. It's like, and
Sorry.
you've explained it so well. Like, I think you obviously got incredibly strong personal insight. To be able to identify, like, yeah, your passion is your thing that keeps you burnt out. The difference between the types of burnout, burnout for someone else, burnout for yourself is different, better, but potentially harder because you can't get rid of it. Like, you can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
But then to identify that that burnout is actually coming from self-worth, like, and not being able to say no in some ways and having to put yourself first by choosing exercise first and all those things. That's why I love like these types of podcasts, because we're not here being like, here's how to run a wellness business. These are just human conditions. These are just like, there's different types of burnout, and the reason that you're feeling burnout is because of your self-worth. And where does that come from? And that's what I think is so interesting. So, okay, so then what has helped you is putting some of your wellness practices first. So, in some ways, raising your self-worth, right?
Totally. So I firmly believe that every problem has a solution. Like, I really do think that there is a solution to every problem. I use it for people's bodies. I never believe that a body is beyond hope. There's always a solution to the problem. It's just finding the solution, and it might not be where you're looking at and to start with. And I think that what happened with my burnout, because it literally just kept on happening, before I ran the business, after I ran the business, it still kind of happens a bit now, but a lot less. And every time it happened, I had to take a big look at myself of like, what am I not doing? What is the solution that I'm not giving myself here? I change a little bit, but I didn't change enough. And that really, it forces me to look at things differently and put things in place. And it's having that discipline to bring in the wellness practices. But like we said at the beginning, the wellness practices are the gateway to your new mindset. So by making time for my posture or yoga or walking or whatever it is, it forces you to be in your body, which is where you sort out the problems that really need to be sorted out. I've had therapy in the last year. I love reading books about like self-development and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And I've just absorbed myself in this world of learning and problem solving to really dig into my psyche of why do I do these certain things over and over again? And why do I have such little amount of self-control to like stop them? So it's been a really deep soul searching journey, like facilitated by wellness practices. But actually it's been so much more than that. But every time something kind of negative happens, I don't think, oh, I need to throw in the towel, or this isn't working, or I'm broken, I need someone else to fix me. It's like, what can I do differently in this moment to get a different result? And that's how I think about everything in life.
It's funny, Ellie. I think, like, this is my personal opinion anyway, but one of your gifts, like, you've got many gifts, obviously, from your postural side of things and your awareness of psychology, but also how humans work. Like, I just think you are gifted in that way. But I think probably beneath all of that, the strongest thing that I get from you is your honesty.
Oh,
I
thank you.
think, yeah, I just think it's so important. Like, I think what is outstanding about you is that you're so honest with yourself. And
Yeah.
that is the only way that somebody can grow, because a lot of people can go to therapy. They could do the 30-day yoga trial. But if they're not being honest with themselves, like, they get something from it, they're going to love it because their body's going to feel great. And, as you say, like, sometimes we're just not ready to do the deeper work. But I think the magic happens when you start being really bloody honest with yourself. And I think that's what you're very, very good at. But with that, and I'm really curious, so like, it's interesting because basically what I was going to ask you then, well, how did you raise your self-worth? Because it's all very well going like, well, raising my self-worth got me out of burnout, but how did you raise your self-worth? But then it's exactly what we said earlier. You met yourself where you were. It wasn't that you went, right, okay, I'm just going to solely focus on self-worth. You just went, okay, well, I'm going to do some more yoga and I'm going to do some more posture stuff. And that's the stuff that works. And in turn, that raised your self-worth, right?
That is exactly it. Like, it comes back to what we said at the beginning. The physical being, the physical body is the gateway to your highest version of yourself. And I'm not saying that I am the highest version of myself or that I'm like lofty or above anybody else, but I've come a long way from where I was before. I had no awareness, just completely blind to who I actually was before I started doing yoga. And yoga and posture has just slowly stripped away all of these, I don't know, veils of illusion. I can't remember what the yoga term is, but you know what I mean. What are they called?
You've got the koshas, which are
Oceans.
the layers of your
That's
being.
it.
Yeah.
So that it literally is that. Like every time you sort of read a bit more about yoga philosophy, or I hear you and Becky talk about it, I'm like, oh my God, like I've been through that. I didn't have a label for it, but it just happens if you trust the process and do the things that you know are good for you, it builds self-worth. I spent so long constantly just abusing my body, alcohol, partying, sitting around, complaining, being a victim, like just not looking after myself in any way. And bit by bit, it's like you make one good decision for yourself, and then you can make the next good decision for yourself. And before you know it, you've made 100 good decisions for yourself and you don't want to make the bad decision. Of course, I still make bad decisions, but not like I did. And that's where the self-worth comes from. And the difference in the way that I see the world, the way that I think about myself is crazy different because of this like slow process of putting one good decision in front of the other rather than just a cascade of bad decisions, which was my 20s.
Yeah, me too. It's a spiral effect, but I think, again, and I'm not just saying this to kind of blow your trumpet, but it's this like a lot of people, and I see it a lot in the yoga world as well. When you start this spiritual journey, and there can be that spiral effect where you start like really having these like, I get it, I'm getting it, I get it, and I feel better, and I get it more, and I understand how the world works, right? Then you can lose touch because then there is this like spiritual ego that is
Mhm.
like, I get it and everyone else has got it wrong. And I love that you are still so humble with what you do. Um,
Well, I have to interject there. I've definitely been through that phase. So we
okay.
spoke about the arrogant thing earlier. So definitely had that. But now I've come around and I'm like, it doesn't work. You don't catch people. And I'm not trying to catch people in a
You
manipulative
don't
way,
meet
but
them.
you don't intrigue people by forcing something down their throat. You have to live it, you have to breathe it, you have to represent it. And the right people will be like, I want a bit of what she's doing. Let's see what she's up to, rather than telling them, like, do this thing, it's amazing, please. Like, yeah, that doesn't work.
It's
I've
hard
been
though,
there.
isn't it? Like I even doing this podcast, I'm so aware of it because I don't want to come across too worthy or like I know everything. That's not how we want to come across. That's why I try and keep it really grounded and real. Um, Sometimes I find it difficult, and maybe these are questions that we'll get to, but when you have gone on this journey, which a lot of people don't, let's be honest, like a spiritual journey or holistic or whatever you want to call it, it can be difficult then to stay, I think, this is my personal feeling, as closely connected to some of the other people in my life who haven't done that. So although it's not like we don't want to be like spiritual ego, at the same time, I do feel it quite difficult to maintain the same depth of connection with people who think so differently to me. Have you had that?
I guess so, to a certain extent. But I think that when you do like what we do and a bit more, perhaps a bit more spiritual than some other people, you pick up your spiritual mates along the way. So
Yeah.
like I've got people that I can talk to about stuff like that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that like I have amazing older friends, like not physically older, like people that I've known for a long time, and we have like a great time. We get drunk in Portugal, like me 2 weeks ago, and yeah, I've got. They bring something completely different, but still equally like joyous. And still within that, there's room to have conversations, and you might be met with a bit more skepticism or a bit more reluctance than I would do with like my yoga crowd, shall we say. But no, I just think that you pick up friends for slightly different reasons, and it doesn't mean that the different reasons are better or worse than the other.
I love that. That's a really healthy perspective. something that I should probably do more. I think I can be too critical. Obviously that starts with yourself, right? And I'm hugely critical on myself. So I feel I can be a bit like that with others, and that is a constant work on. Like I ran a training the other day and I'm like, we were short on time and I was just pretty fierce. And then I emailed them afterwards being like, I hope you know, like that comes from passion, but that life for me is a constant lesson of softening. And that's true. Like I see that now in astrology, like that is what I'm here to do, is to like learn how to soften. So I'm interested because the question I was going to ask is, when you're that passionate about, well, like you obviously have a very growth mindset, like you know, you're honest with yourself, you grow, like you're interested in psychology, physical health, mental health, all of that. And you have mentioned that you suffer from burnout. So when you have a growth mindset like that, like you're reading, you want to read about like psychology and how humans work and all of that. Do you have something that you do, and maybe you've answered it with Portugal, Valda Lobo, that you just like, you do, which is not like that? It's not growth mindset, it's just like pure fun. Does that help you? Do you do that?
Um, I think I'm fun. I do think I'm fun. I definitely like let rip, shall we say, with like my friends from school, from uni, hen parties and weddings, and you know that we have an amazing time together. Festivals I still love, but I have to say that my day-to-day life would probably look very, very boring to lots of people, and it's so weird to me when I compare myself to how I was like 10 years ago. But my day-to-day life is fairly like austere, to use, I don't know if that's the right word, but I am fairly disciplined. I do live a fairly quiet life. I don't really get pleasure from buying things and consuming things. And that to me, it just isn't a driver anymore. And I can't really explain when that happened, but it has come from this place where I truly feel, to like bring it back to sort of what we said at the beginning about Dharma. I feel like I'm living my Dharma, and then there's not that much more space for like other things, because this is truly what I feel like I've been put here to do. So it does consume a lot of my mind. But as a little side note, for Valentine's Day, Ben had bought me, you're probably too cool because I feel like you were one of the cool girls at school and I was definitely not. But for Valentine's Day, Ben bought me Age of Empires.
I know what it is.
You know what it is?
I know what it is.
For those of you who don't know, it's an incredibly geeky, like ancient civilization battle game. We've played that a lot recently. That's been like our thing. We've got it set up on the TV at home, and we take it in turns, my husband and I, to play Age of Empires. So this is life without children, people. This is what you have. So yeah, so that's how I've been letting
You
loose.
are fun.
It's really addictive. It's such a good game.
I know it so well. My sister and I used to play it, like trying to build the little teams and the castles and all the little
Yeah,
army men. And I know well.
there you go. So that's how I relax at the moment.
Well, that's great. That is good to hear. So, for anyone, like we talk about Dharma a fair amount. So, anyone that maybe hasn't listened to the rest of the podcast or isn't familiar with Dharma, there's some really good definitions that we've got here that I feel like would be nice to share. So one of them is thinking about it in the way that posture is how you meet the world physically, mental state is how you interpret the world internally, and Dharma is how you serve the world soulfully. And then there's this really lovely metaphor, which is if you think of yourself as a musical instrument, physical alignment is tuning the strings, mental alignment is quietening the noise in the room, and then Dharma is the music that can finally come through, unique, resonant, and needed. And I love that at the end of that, and needed, because what I also think about when you're being honest and you saying like you sometimes you lose your practice or you lose your self-care or whatever, is actually those struggles, those challenges that we go through as a practitioner, I think humble us and I think help us meet people where they are again. And those are your people. So when we're talking about this Dharma being needed, there are people out there in the world that need you. And the frequency and the power of your gift, right, is only going to come through that real authenticity.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to define that, and also just, I guess, reiterate what we're saying about honesty and how important it is, even when you're having struggles in your practice. So Ellie, your Dharma, so what's next? Where is this going? Do you know?
So I don't know, but I have an idea of where I want to go. So I think one of the things that I've learned is that you can have a goal and actually you might be taking on a completely different path, but it still feels right. So like you can have an idea of where you're going, but actually you're like, oh, weird. You get a bit like sideswiped by this thing. So for me, like I always knew that I wanted to write a book, but I thought that was going to be years and years away. And then a couple of years ago, I got approached by a literary agent and got the book deal. So that happened sooner than I thought. And then that takes a big chunk of time and energy out to do that. So I feel like I'm like a phoenix rising from the ashes again at the moment, where the book was very depleting. Like I'm so happy I did it, but to sit at a desk and to have 60,000 words to write over like a 5-month period is quite intense, and run a business. So that's done. And I feel like at the moment I'm a bit like, oh, weird. I've got this time, where am I going again? But I feel like what my ultimate goal is, and how that transpires, I don't quite know, but my ultimate goal is to really teach people that they are worthy of making time for themselves, and posture is the thing that they need to do to like facilitate their life. Your age isn't causing your pain. It's the state of your body is causing your pain. That's different to age. And you can change it. Like you don't have to give up. You don't have to be on all these like pain medications, and you don't have to give your power over to somebody else. You have it all within you, but you have to make the time for yourself. And my goal is to, with the membership platform, is to help facilitate an easy way for people to do that, where it's not ridiculously expensive like it would be if they were having like one-to-one appointments with me every week. It's like, just do this thing, make 3 to 4 half-an-hour sessions for yourself every week, and you will change your life. Like I firmly believe that. I've done that. And that is kind of where my Dharma is taking me, but how I get there or where it's sort of going, I don't really know. I'm not a very like business goaly, like Q2 projection type person. I really do go with the flow and go with what my gut tells me to do.
Love it. Well, I'm excited to see where it takes you. I personally love watching the journey.
Ah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know.
So I'm interested, Ellie, like what we've spoken about, and you can refuse to answer this when we could edit this out.
Oh,
But,
juicy.
well, because there's a couple of things. So one is you've spoken about your self-worth and having to raise that, and you having therapy about like potentially where that came from. Do you know where that came from?
I suspect that it came from, I'm going to say this because he won't listen to it, but my dad was a bit of a poo when I was a kid, and he would leave and he would come back, and he would leave and he would come back, and then it was a very confusing place to be as like a young child, I think. And I think it's just probably very, very deep abandonment wounds when you look into all this kind of stuff. It's that sense of children look up to their parents and expect the best from them, and they're their world, they're their savior. And I was very much like a daddy's girl, and my daddy kept going away and then coming back and going away. And I think probably that's where it comes from. It's like a deep sense of like, I'm not worthy because even one of my parents can't be there for me. And it happens so young that it becomes so subconscious, the way that you deal with it. Your coping mechanisms are so automatic that you can't like see them for what they are until perhaps you go into therapy and then someone explains like, well, you do this because you're hiding from this thing or whatever. And it's like, oh, my body and I'm reacting to things actually in a perfectly normal way, but this is just like my nervous system wiring, and I just, in inverted commas, have to change that and like unwire that. So yeah, I think that's where it came from. And then as an adult, you can put things into perspective to be like, it's not my fault you had a bit of a crap dad. It's a child, it's not never a child's fault that their parent probably wasn't right to be a parent. And then it's making peace with that. Whereas for such a long time, it was so subconscious. I was mentally beating myself up that somehow it was like my fault that that happened.
Really, again, like so insightful, but also like from the psychology perspective, I mean, I struggle with this too, because when I talk about my dad and being an alcoholic and things, you think, oh, I mean, my dad's not here anymore, so the chances of him listening to this podcast are even slimmer. But it's like this thought of, is it okay to say those things? And I think what I've come to terms with on this is like, and I know you'll have a sense of this too, is that people are only ever doing the best they can with the tools they have, right? So the way
Yeah.
that your dad parented at that time was the best he could do, because otherwise humans, he just would have done it better. So that's what he had available to him at the time. And it's interesting that you say like maybe he shouldn't have been a parent, because when we now look at things like astrology, it's like, but maybe he should. Maybe that's exactly how it made you how you are, and that's what we need, right? So
That is, yeah, I try and use that as like, I guess, my comfort blanket of like, I wouldn't be the person that I am today if he hadn't put me through hell as a child. But it is also a bit like, you kind of wish it hadn't happened as well. But I do agree with you. It does make you who you are.
totally. I think it is true. I mean, I get that it feels a bit Pollyanna and a bit positive, but it's also true. You wouldn't be who you are if you weren't brought up the way that you were. So, but isn't it so important? Like, I'm really interested in the nervous system at the moment, and I just think I mean, it's responsible for nearly everything, right? And understanding why your nervous system works how it is a key to like healing yourself on that
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
And we have a very similar like background in that way. So I'm just always interested in how that's played out and how aware you are of that, or how aware one is of that when they're kind of on this journey. And how do you think, and again, we can edit this out, how do you think that has impacted your romantic relationship? Because I'm allowed, Ellie, if I'm allowed, you came on our retreat to India. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
know what I
yeah.
say?
The list.
The list.
The
So
list.
who's that? I remember it so clearly. So
I do too.
there was like 20 over 20 people on this retreat in India that we did. And there was two villas next door to each other, because we filled one, and then he was like, oh, we have a neighbour, she's also got villas. So we're like, right, we'll fill the other one. And we were like paddling around in this little pool. Do you remember? I had like my trousers pulled up to my knees, it was boiling hot, and we were just paddling around, just kind of like chatting all things life. And we were talking about who you might meet as your like future partner. And was it me? Because I can't remember if you wrote the list or if I said write a list.
You told me to write the list, and I think I did it. And then I think it was in India, and I think I like showed you I was like, this is my list that I've done. Because you were like, I wrote a list, and then I met Adam.
I asked the universe what I wanted and it appeared.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, that is so funny. So then, and I remember the lumberjack shirt.
yes. And he had so many lumberjack. Well, he's got rid of some of them now, but he's still got so many lumberjack shirts. Beard, lumberjack shirts. Can't remember what else. Those are the two things.
Those are the only important things, let's be honest.
So there were some like more deep
Sure, I
non-negotiables in
believe
that,
you.
but I do remember the beard and the lumberjack shirt. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we found lovely Ben, and you're now married, and you work together in your business. So how have you found, maybe this is too deep a connection, but is there a connection with like what you've mentioned about your dad, and has that had an impact on your personal relationship?
Definitely it has, but I think it transpired more in like my previous relationship. So the guy that I was with before Ben was like an example of who I shouldn't have been with. And we were completely not suited. But because of my self-worth being so low, I put up with stuff that I would never put up with now. And I just allowed myself to get like distracted by other things, like someone taking you out for meals or buying you things versus like actually the person that they are. I was sort of, oh wow, this is like a model of a boyfriend who is like taking me for a meal. Therefore, I am in a relationship and this is great, without it like actually being in any way good after a while. And so that was crazy in hindsight, that like my self-worth was so low that I was in a relationship like that for like 6 years. And then when I met Ben, I think because I'd started all of this stuff already at this point, I was starting from like an elevated position of like, I know a bit more who I am. I know a bit more what I want. I know a bit more actually what's important with a relationship. And so met Ben, obviously much better suited to me than my ex-boyfriend. But the problems with my dad have definitely still like manifested themselves in different ways, because my the thing that I would like to change about myself the most is that my deepest like thought that I have that underlines everything is that you can't trust other people. That's my what I tell myself in everything that I do. It's like I have to do everything because I can't trust other people to do it for me. And I think that is very difficult. He's getting used to it, I think, but that's very difficult for Ben, because I'm like, I'll make jokes, be like, oh, have a good time with your friends this weekend. Don't cheat on me and stuff like that. But then he's like, stop saying that. I'm not going to. Like, when are you going to get over the fact that that's not going to happen? But probably never, because that's what I've been modeled from such a young age. But that would be the thing that I would love to change. It doesn't really get in the way of us, but I would love for that not to be there.
Well, maybe in our next interview, whenever that comes about, we'll see how that's going. But I think with your level of self-awareness, even if it remained, you'd be able to navigate around it, right? Like that's the beauty of self-awareness, is that not necessarily everything has to change, but just by being aware of it is enough.
Yeah.
But that is really interesting. And now you and Ben work beautifully together, don't you, on your business?
Yeah, I mean, as with any couple, we have our ups and downs, we have our arguments and our scraps. But we're finding our feet with it, and he's taking over the like product line that he's developing. And I think he's really enjoying that. I was saying before the call, like he loves like wood and designing things and making things. So it's kind of utilizing his talents, and he's helping me with like editing videos and upping the production value of stuff. And then I just get to shout about posture, which is obviously like what I love to do. So it's really, really nice. And often I have these like pinch me moments of just like, I cannot believe that this is my life. Like I can't believe that I got myself to a position where actually I get to prat around with my husband for work. And then if I want to finish at like 2 p.m. and go on the dog walk, I can.
And you're right, you did that. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and that's the beautiful thing about it, is that you do it, you prove that other people can do it, and it is possible. You
Yeah.
know? So it is always good to hear that and to talk about it and to hopefully inspire others, because I think, yeah, you do have an incredibly inspiring story. So it's been lovely to chat to you about it, Ellie.
Thank you so much. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I love being on podcasts. It's an absolute pleasure. But I also want to have the chance to grill you a little bit about where you came from and your Dharma and how you got here. So is that okay?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
So obviously now you're really into yoga, and I know that you also like running, but kind of how did you get to yoga in the same way that I did? Like, how did you find yoga? What were you doing like before that? And what kind of exercise were you into and stuff?
The opposite. So I would always have thought, and there was this phrase that I used to use, that like if I had time, I wasn't going to be wafting around on a yoga mat. And that's very much like I can hear my mum's like voice in that. And so now to think that obviously, my life, bar my kids and my husband, is like basically all, based on yoga is kind of a joke. How that has changed. And that came from burnout. So that came from me. So I was doing the London job, different to you. That was my dream previously. I thought it was my dream, like consciously. I was like, I'm going to be a city slicker. Like, that's me. And I was in bank, I was in the center of London, and I was in a global ad agency, and I was flying around, and we had lots of different clients in Europe, and I was doing all these big presentations, and I was like doing the thing that I thought I wanted. And it was that cliche that like, I was like, okay, now I'm here. This is not the dream. And
Yeah.
like, if this is not the dream, then what is the dream? And that was coupled with like real anxiety. I mean, just stress that I hadn't really imagined, having panic attacks, which weren't called panic attacks then, but like on the tube and the way in, just like sweat dripping off my nose. I remember like one meeting where I had to read this script, and it was an awful script, like one of the creatives had written, and it was so awful that it was making me cringe. But I was like, again, the sweat was dripping off my face, like in the meeting, and I was on like a board of like a table of like maybe 20 people all watching me read this thing, just like melting. I remember walking out of the room and just being like, I actually can't do this. I can't do this on my nervous system. The reason that I felt so uncomfortable reading that script is I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in what we were doing. I didn't want to be doing it. Right. And I was just like, what is this? Like, I'm just living this fake life. And with 20 eyes on me, I feel people can see through it. And that's what it was. I felt like a fraud because I didn't want to be doing it. I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was just having a panic attack and like I wasn't confident. But it was because it wasn't aligned with me. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing. It was a load of bollocks. And like, I knew that. And then at the same time, Dad was in intensive care. So he had a triple heart bypass when I was really young. So we always knew that he was like on borrowed time, that he's like pigs and
Yeah.
cows, and pigs lived a certain amount of years. And it was like, right. So we sort of knew he wasn't well, but he was in intensive care, so it's pretty bad. And he was in and out of hospital like that for a few months, which is a pretty dark time because, you know, you kind of get that call, like it's now. And I'd kind of
Yeah.
go from the hospital and then it wasn't, and then it was. And then obviously he passed away eventually. And that was just like, considering how long that process was, if you'd have asked me, I'd be like, I'm ready. I've expected this since I was quite a young kid. I remember at my secondary school EPS and with my friends being like, yeah, I'll probably be this age when it happens, because it was quite medical, like we sort of knew. And yet it just absolutely floored me. And it floored me in such a different way that I thought. It floored me because I just basically had to figure out who I was again. And that was
Yeah.
not what I expected from dad passing away. You know, I thought it would just sort of been like really missing my dad. Of course, that was part of it. But the biggest part of it was this like existential crisis. Like I just didn't realize when he was alive that so much of what I was doing was for his approval. So I just
Yeah.
basically had to start again, and figure out who I was and what I really liked. And it was honestly by chance that I was so burnt out. I was so poorly. I was drinking so much. I was just an absolute wreck, to be honest, at that point. This is in my 20s as well. And I couldn't do all like my normal, I do like hit and spin and netball. I was so competitive in every part of my life. And then everyone was like, oh, try yoga because it might help you. And I was like, oh my God, like, you know, I was just that person that was like, I'm not going to be wafting around on a yoga mat. Like, and then I did. And it was so quick. It was literally a beginner's class. The lady who taught it, who I know now well, Natalie, at the House of Yoga, was my age to start with. So in her
Yeah.
20s. And I was like, how is she teaching yoga for a living? Like,
That's how I felt about you.
right. And isn't that amazing how it comes
Yeah.
around? And what she was saying about, like, you know, you can look after yourself and, like, you know, why do you push yourself so hard? Where do you hold yourself back? All these types of things that I was like, oh my God, just learned so much about myself so quickly. Was at such a loss at what to do. I just decided to do their teacher training. And, you know, everything from there changed. And so then I left London, I moved to Worcester with Sam, and then we started Wayland's and your yoga, but then Soul Sanctuary. And then things basically evolved from there. So yeah, it was again a story of not living in alignment.
Yeah.
And that I'm really clear as well that that came from, I mean, it would be other things as well, cultural, schooling. I think my boarding school had a massive part to play in it. But dad, you know, and that's why I kind of resonated with what you said about your dad, because my dad was only doing the best he could, but
Yeah.
he came from an era, like if dad was still alive now, he'd be like mid 80s. So in that era, it was like, there was a lot of drinking, there was a lot of gambling, there was zero self-inquiry, zero mental health,
Yeah.
not much on physical health either, to be honest. Um, and so that lack of self-awareness meant that he basically brought us up, or not, you know, in a way that was had incredibly high expectations, and it was very much based on how much he was paying for schooling, and so therefore I should be achieving XYZ or being
Yeah.
a lawyer or a doctor or at least working in the city, you know, um, that type of thing. And so I just inherited this like perfectionism, this drive to achieve. But I only figured out later that that was the crux of the issue, was that, and
Mm.
still is actually, if I'm really honest, is something that I constantly have to work on. And it's interesting when you say your thing about trust, like, will it ever go away? I don't know, and I don't know if mine will ever go away, which is that my self-worth is definitely connected to my achievement. It's like
Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous. So like I have to achieve every day, otherwise I feel depressed.
Yeah.
Not every day, but kind of. And I think that's something that is I'm constantly trying to let go of. But it's really hard because I like the product of it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love how driven I am. I love how much I know I can achieve. I love like the volume that I can take on. I want a big life. Like, and I have no doubt that I'll get there only because of what I'll put myself through. Right? And is that
Yeah.
healthy or not? I don't know.
Probably not. But I was just thinking, because I really don't mean this in like a patronizing way to you at all, but I am a bit older than you. I'm like 3, 4 years older. And a few years ago, that was very much what I wanted as well, where I was like, I want to do all the things and prove all the things to everybody and make all this money and like have this massive business and be this brand. And now my version of success is I just want a quiet, peaceful life. I completely changed it. I make a lot less money than I did a few years ago, but I am so much happier for it. And I have this sense of, I was exactly the same as you. Every day was a to-do list of 20 things I had to tick off, and it is so tiring. There's no space for life if you live like that. And now I do still have periods like that, but I see it as a mark of success when I'm finishing work early, when I'm just hanging out playing Age of Empires, walking the dog. That for me is like this massive shift. And I don't quite know where it came from, but you never know, because that might change a bit for you, because it did change for me.
I do love that, and I have moments of it, and it's like I know and I feel the truth in it, but it's just that like hungry wolf is so vicious. He's like just driving me on all the time. And I don't think kids have helped in that, because and
Mm,
whether this is nonsense or whether this is true, but I remember like certain moments, the opposite of aha moments, like we were staying with my mum to try and save up to buy somewhere, and like she was living in this tiny cottage and we were all crammed in, and Lenny was like in a cot in the lounge. It was just like a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. And I remember looking at Lenny playing in the park, and it was like raining and he was so miserable sat in this little like choo-choo train. And I like burst into tears, and I was like, I'm not having this. I'm not having it. Like, I'm gonna make my life better for you. You're gonna have an incredible life. And it's funny how like it's changed again, and it's almost made me more driven, because now I've got them, and not just one of them, two of them. And like, so there's knowing, and then there's just this instinct, which is just like pretty fierce. um so it's about, for me, it's about softening that, as I said, this like lifelong lesson of trying to soften
yeah,
and knowing. And I know like in my head, like that's not what is going to make my kids happy. There's going to be that I'm present and that I'm happy and all of that, so I'm trying to do that as well. But life's hard, right? It's balancing all of these things. It's knowing yourself, it's working on them, and then it's also like trying to enjoy it as well. um that was a long answer, wasn't
yeah.
it?
I was really enjoying the answer to it though. I see like a lot of parallels between us. I always have done. I think there are parallels between us, but I guess what's kind of interesting to me is almost like the absence of my dad has been a very big driver for me. But for you, it was almost like the presence of your dad, or what he expected of you, was like your driver. But both of the symptom is the same, but the kind of cause is a bit different, but both dad related, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that's uncommon. Like some of the most messages I've got from doing the podcast is people kind of saying that, is going, God, I really resonated when you said this about your dad, or when you said this, or whatever. So yeah, I don't, we've all got parents, and like I can't say the phrase fully, as they say in therapy, but like I don't know how to say it another way, is that they like F and then they F you up,
Yeah,
is what they say. Is like that's what happens when your parents, like they mess you up. You can't be a perfect parent, there's no such thing. So we're
no,
all messed up in some way, and it's about acknowledging that and going, that's okay. Like this is the part of me that I can grow, and this is the part that I'm always going to be working with. And it's a huge responsibility, because knowing that about how my dad was, how your dad was, and now I look at my two children and I'm like, I don't want to mess them up, but like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to in some way. And it's just about, I guess, trying to have enough self-awareness to minimize that as much as possible, and to maximize, what you're giving them, and their self-worth, as we've said, is a lot of what
yeah,
this comes down to.
yeah. And maybe if I can reconcile that exact same thing, maybe that would be something that would encourage me to want to have kids more. But I honestly think there is a thing of it. I'm just like, I don't want to have kids because I just don't want to mess anyone else up.
I think that's really honest, and I think when we run our trainings, that's the theme. It's the
Yeah,
people that don't want to have kids are scared that they're going to mess somebody else up. And that's why I think it's really important to say out loud, we all mess our kids up. Like that's just going to happen. I mean, if you've ever seen Tony Robbins do that thing on like I'm Not Your Guru, and he holds up that microphone. Have you seen it on Netflix?
I think I have. It was a few years ago that I watched it, but I'm pretty sure I did watch it. Yeah.
So he interviews this woman, and one of them talks about how awful her dad was, and everyone kind of goes, "Oh God, yeah, that's really awful." And then he interviews another woman, and she's like, "I don't know what the problem is. My dad was incredible, perfect, actually." And Tony takes the microphone, and down the microphone he goes, "What an asshole!" And everyone's like, "What?" And he basically says, like, your parent being so perfect has fucked you up because no one is going to live up to your standard. So it's brilliant because in the room you see the dad that messed it up, that's messed her up, the dad that didn't mess her up, that's messed her up, and the outcome is you're all messed up. And it's just about embracing it and going, life's really messy, and we live and we learn and we grow, but it isn't about doing it right. It isn't about being perfect. It's about having a go, but the experience along the way and what your kids give you, you can't put it in words.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I'm not here saying that kids are for everyone. I'm just saying that if the root of it is coming from a fear of messing someone up, like, don't let that stop you because it's going to happen anyway.
I'm not sure I find that too reassuring, but I'll consider it. I'll consider
I've just
it.
reaffirmed your biggest fear.
So I think maybe the final thing I want to ask you is we're talking about alignment and Dharma and our purpose and stuff today. So how do you feel at the moment that there might be some things that are out of alignment, be it relationships or family or work or personal stuff? Like, where are you a bit out of alignment, and what is it that you're going to do to change that?
Okay, so I'll start with the business. So the business is really challenging. The studio is really challenging, I should say. The teacher training's not so much, because it's basically me running it, with some other guest teachers, and it's lovely. I absolutely love doing that. And I find it pretty easy. The studio is a different beast because the overheads are so high, and unless you basically teach all the yoga classes yourself as a studio owner, my experience is that it's pretty much a break-even model. And I'm in groups of WhatsApp groups with other yoga studio owners, and they're all saying the same thing. It's pretty difficult. So we're in the process, actually, we're looking at changing it to a charity, and that will fit really much better with me from a body language perspective, because it won't be like a struggling business, it will be like a successful charity. And that's what it is. It's not a profit-making business. It never has been, like, as in big profit, right? It's a community business. It gives back to the community. The reason that I'm doing it, I've never taken, like, my salary from that business has never been more than like 500 quid a month, right?
Yeah.
And that was fine before I teacher training and I didn't have children. So I just, whatever, survived off that. When you have kids, you can't do that anymore. And obviously everything was pointing towards, like, just shut it down. Why are you doing it? Anyone I speak to is like, shut it down. And I can't, because I care so deeply about what it gives people. Hearing your story, right?
Yeah.
And like hundreds of people who have felt similar have come through those doors and rely on it. They rely on it when they're going through divorce or whatever. The community, like, I can't shut it down. So I keep it going, but it takes a lot of time, and it gives pretty much nothing back. So turning it into a charity for me makes that just feel better. So that will be a lot more aligned with what I'm up to from a business perspective. Where am I going with that? Well, so what I want to do, we're renovating properties in Devon, and that's because I want to get to a point where I don't need a landlord, so I can have basically a property that I can have the size studios plural that I need to run the teacher trainings and retreats and things like that. And that's what keeps me going. Like, I'm really excited about that. That will make me feel pretty aligned. What else did you ask? Relationships, alignment. Yeah, so Adam and I were working on it. We're working on it. I think relationships are so difficult. It's like, I remember, right, when the first date that I went on with Adam, I wrote a list, not the same list as you. I didn't show him the list of him. But I said to him, like, what are your values? And a lot of this came from the Tony Robbins work, like 1 to 10, what's most important to you in your life? And like, travel was pretty high for me at that time. I mean, that was never going to happen for him because he already had a kid, right? He wasn't going to like leave and go traveling. We kind of had to look at our values and go, like, are we aligned? And funny, like, we we figured it out, and we're quite aligned on those types of values. But you know what we're not aligned on, and I think this is just more representative of men and women, is the load. And people probably hear this and be like, oh God, don't start. But it is that we aren't aligned on the load, and that really is something that we need to work on.
Yeah.
So that is something we're working on, and that will help me feel more aligned, I think, when there's more balance in our relationship, just from a load perspective, because there is a lot on. And yeah, I do think a lot of it falls to the woman. I mean, I know we're running over time, but it's like, he said to me the other day, I was like, we're trying to design this whole house. We're renovating a whole house. We bought it on auction, right? Right now, if you could see it, there's just bricks in the middle of the rooms. Like, it's terrifying. So I'm trying to figure it all out. And I was asking him about like what he thought. He was like, oh, I don't know. I feel like, you know, like the design of the house is kind of like your thing. And I was like, okay, so the whole house is my thing. Like, what? How does that
Can I ask you a question about that though?
Mm-hmm.
If he designed it, would you be happy with it?
I'd be so happy that he helped. I would. Look, I'm critical. I said that.
I don't believe you, Laura. I don't believe you. If that was me and Ben was, oh yeah, don't worry about it, hun, I'll design the house. I'd be like, no, you absolutely will not.
You know what? You're right. Like, it's just not all or nothing. It's just, I would just like some support, just like some help. We did have a breakthrough day yesterday. I think, yeah, it probably saved our relationships when we went to this place and we designed some bits together. And he put his hands up and he went, I had no idea the detail. Because he walks into a bathroom and he's like, yeah, this is nice. It's like, okay, but are the valves on the radiator angled or are they straight? Like, is it a hung toilet? Is there a stud wall behind the toilet? Like, had like all the stuff that he's just like, like that just gets done.
To be honest, I don't know those words you just said.
Sure, and why would you? But what I'm saying is he's living in a house where it just appears of him. I'm like, let's get on board. So the balance in our relationship would be great. Alignment, I think we'll get there. And then, yeah, well, I think is that it?
Maybe it is. Maybe, but you probably are living fairly in alignment, to be honest.
I feel like it. Like you, I feel very lucky that, you know, I live by the sea. I've got my beautiful kids. Like, we're well. This is the life that I wanted. So yeah, I feel very, very lucky in that way. And I guess this is something that actually I'm going to be speaking to a future guest about, interestingly, because I spoke to her about it the other day, and maybe it's a lasting thought for both of us, is there is a balance, I think, between like guilt and resentment. We're not going to go into this now. It's a big topic. But it's like, I felt very guilty about leaving Worcester because of that duty to like keep the studio going and other reasons as well, family, etc. But, you know, when I was there, I was feeling pretty resentful because it wasn't actually where I was meant to be. I felt that. And I felt I could do both, but everyone told me I couldn't. And so now I don't have any resentment, right? But it is a difficult choice between guilt and resentment. So sometimes I feel guilty that I'm not there, but I don't feel the resentment that I felt when I was having to be there for like other people, right? Yeah. So that does feel more aligned, but it's an interesting choice, isn't it? When you start choosing for you and what you want, like you may let go of resentment, but you may feel more guilt, and that's something that's still there. But yeah,
I read this or heard this so recently, and I can't remember who it was, but it was like there's always going to be a choice between guilt and resentment, but you should always choose guilt. You should always choose guilt, because guilt's an internal problem that you can solve, but resentment's like it's something else.
The power is with someone else. Yeah. So it's a learning. Life is constant learning. But listen, I have loved chatting with you, and thank you for your great questions, and hope to get you on again soon.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was an absolute pleasure, and I think we could talk all day.
Yeah, evidently.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Your time is precious, and we truly appreciate you spending it with us. We look forward to having you join us again soon. So, take care, and we'll catch you in the next episode.